In 2016, researchers studying octopus DNA published a paper that made headlines well outside the usual science press. The octopus genome had been sequenced, and what it revealed was deeply unusual. Octopuses have around 33,000 protein-coding genes. Humans have approximately 20,000. The genome was large and complex in unexpected ways, containing a massive expansion of gene families associated with neural development, nearly all of them unique to cephalopods. One of the lead researchers, neuroscientist Clifton Ragsdale, described it as feeling like the work of an alien. That description stuck because it captured something genuine about the octopus. Not that octopuses are literally alien, but that their intelligence evolved in a way that was almost entirely disconnected from the lineage that produced every other animal we typically think of as smart. Understanding what that means requires going back quite far. The broad division of animal life into vertebrates and invertebrates happened somewhere around 600 million years ago. Vertebrates, the lineage that eventually produced fish, amphibians, reptiles, birds, and mammals, developed a particular body plan built around a bony skeleton and a centralized nervous system with a brain at the top. Invertebrates, everything else went in different directions. Mollusks, the group that includes clams, snails, and slugs, are invertebrates. So are cephalopods, the class that includes octopuses, squid, cuttlefish, and nautiluses. Cephalopods branched off from other mollusks somewhere around 500 million years ago. The last common ancestor they share with vertebrates was almost certainly a simple flatworm-like creature with no recognizable nervous system to speak of. Whatever intelligence vertebrates eventually developed and whatever intelligence cephalopods eventually developed emerged from essentially nothing in completely separate lineages over hundreds of millions of years with no connection between them. This is what biologists mean when they talk about convergent evolution in the context of octopus intelligence. It is not that octopuses are smart in the way humans are smart. It is that both lineages arrived at something we recognize as sophisticated cognition despite starting from the same blank slate and taking completely different roads. The scale of octopus intelligence is genuinely hard to overstate when you look at what they can actually do. Octopuses use tools. They have been observed collecting discarded coconut shell halves on the ocean floor, carrying them to a different location, and later assembling them into a shelter. This is not instinctive behavior in the way a bird building a nest might be. It requires carrying an object without immediate benefit in anticipation of future use, which places it in a category of behavior that researchers associate with planning and mental representation of a future state. Before this was documented in octopuses, tool use of this kind had been considered a meaningful marker of higher cognitive function observed in primates, certain birds, and very few other species. Octopuses also demonstrate something that looks strongly like play. In laboratory settings, individual octopuses have been observed repeatedly releasing objects into a water current, letting the current carry them, and then retrieving and releasing them again. The behavior has no obvious foraging or survival function. It looks to researchers who have documented it at length like an animal doing something because it is interested in doing problem-solving ability is well established. Octopuses can navigate mazes, open screw-top jars, solve multi-step puzzles, and recognize individual human faces, the last of which is particularly striking since faces are not an obvious category an animal with no mammalian social evolution would be expected to parse. An octopus at an aquarium in New Zealand reportedly singled out a specific staff member for water squirting, consistently over multiple encounters, which is either anecdote or a reasonably compelling data point depending on your standards, but aligns with more controlled studies showing octopuses can distinguish between individual humans. There's also strong evidence for individual personality differences between octopuses. When researchers expose individual animals to the same stimuli in the same conditions, the response patterns vary in consistent ways from animal to animal. Some are consistently bolder. Some are consistently more cautious. Some are consistently more aggressive. Personality variation of this kind, stable across time and situations, is another trait that behavioral researchers have historically treated as a marker of more complex cognitive life. What makes all of this particularly striking is the biological structure supporting it. An octopus nervous system contains roughly 500 million neurons, comparable in scale to a dog's, but the distribution of those neurons is radically different from anything you would find in a vertebrate. Only about a third of an octopus's neurons are located in its central brain. The remaining two-thirds are distributed throughout its 8 arms, with each arm containing its own substantial neural cluster capable of independent processing. This means an octopus arm is not simply receiving commands from a central brain and executing them. It is processing sensory information and making local decisions independently. If you sever an octopus arm, the arm will continue reaching toward food and attempting to bring it to where the mouth used to be, for up to an hour after separation with no input from the central nervous system. The arm is, in a meaningful sense, doing something that resembles local cognition on its own. The implications of this architecture for how we think about intelligence are genuinely interesting. Vertebrate intelligence, including human intelligence, runs on a heavily centralized model. One brain taking in information from a distributed sensory system, processing it, and sending out commands. The octopus model is far more decentralized. The animal is not so much a centralized mind running a body as it is a collaborative system of semi-autonomous processing units that happen happen to be coordinated by a central brain for some tasks and not for others. Whether this represents a fundamentally different kind of cognition or simply a different implementation of cognition that produces broadly similar capabilities is one of the more interesting open questions in the field. The lifespan problem is where the octopus story gets genuinely strange. Common octopuses live for roughly 1 to 2 years. Giant Pacific octopuses, the largest species, live for 3 to 5 years. This makes octopuses, despite their cognitive complexity, among the shortest-lived intelligent animals we know of. Most vertebrates with comparable cognitive complexity, crows, parrots, dolphins, primates, live for decades. Humans live for the better part of a century. Lifespan matters enormously for intelligence in most animals we study, because learning takes time. Complex cognition in vertebrates is typically built on extended periods of development, learning from parents and social groups, and accumulating experience over years. A short-lived animal has much less time for any of this. An octopus that lives for a year or two also has almost no parental care of offspring. Octopus mothers guard their eggs, but typically die around or shortly after hatching without surviving to teach their young anything. Young octopuses hatch into an environment they must navigate entirely on their own, with no accumulated cultural knowledge, no learned behaviors passed down from experienced adults. And yet, despite all of this, they end up capable of tool use, planning, problem-solving, play, and individual personality. The cognitive complexity octopuses achieve within a lifespan of a couple of years, without any social learning framework, is genuinely difficult to explain within the frameworks developed to understand vertebrate intelligence. One hypothesis is that the decentralized nervous system is part of the answer. If cognition is distributed across the arms rather than requiring heavy central processing, the animal may be able to develop functional intelligent behavior more rapidly and with less developmental scaffolding than a centrally organized brain would require. Another hypothesis focuses on the particular ecological demands of the octopus's niche. Octopuses are generalist predators that hunt a wide variety of prey, often using radically different strategies for different prey types. They are also prey for a large number of other animals and rely heavily on flexibility rather than specialization to survive. This may create strong selective pressure for behavioral flexibility, which is closely related to general intelligence, independent of the lifespan and social learning advantages that typically support it in vertebrates. The camouflage question is worth its own attention, because it adds another layer of strangeness. Octopuses are the fastest and most sophisticated color changers in the animal kingdom. They can alter the color pattern and texture of their skin within fractions of a second to match backgrounds with remarkable precision, not just color but the specific spatial patterns and surface textures of rock, coral, sand, and algae. The mechanisms behind this involve specialized skin cells called chromatophores, iridophores, and papillae, controlled through direct neural input. The deeply strange part is that octopuses are colorblind. All available evidence suggests they cannot see color, and yet they match color patterns in their environment with impressive accuracy. How an animal that cannot see color manages to match color has been a genuine research puzzle for years, with several competing hypotheses and no fully settled answer. One interesting proposal is that the unusual pupil shape of the octopus eye, a U-shaped or W-shaped horizontal pupil that produces different amounts of chromatic aberration at different light wavelengths, may allow the animal to infer color information from how sharply light focuses on different parts of the retina at different pupil diameters. Another possibility involves photoreceptors in the skin itself, which have been documented in some species, suggesting the skin might detect light independently of the eyes. Neither explanation has been conclusively established. There is a broader point that the octopus makes more clearly than almost any other animal. When biologists and philosophers think about intelligence and consciousness, the usual reference points are animals relatively close to us on the evolutionary tree. Other mammals are close. Birds are further, but still vertebrates. Even fish, despite being evolutionarily more distant, share the same fundamental nervous system architecture as humans, just in a less elaborated form. Octopuses sit outside almost all of this. Their last common ancestor with vertebrates predates almost everything we associate with complex animal life. Their nervous system is structured on principles that have no direct analog in any vertebrate. Their lifespan is short, their social structure is minimal, and their method of experiencing the world, through 8 semi-autonomous arms, each with its own local processing, is something we have no real equivalent for. When an octopus solves a puzzle or recognizes a face or plays with an object out of apparent curiosity, it is doing those things with a cognitive architecture built from completely different materials along a completely different path over hundreds of millions of years. That means whatever is happening when an octopus thinks, and the evidence that something reasonably describable as thinking is happening seems solid at this point. It is a kind of thinking that arrived at similar outputs through an entirely alien process. The octopus is perhaps the strongest available argument that complex cognition is not something that required a specific evolutionary path to produce, not something unique to vertebrates or to lineages that developed it the way our ancestors did. Given enough evolutionary time and enough selective pressure, apparently, minds of a kind emerge from almost nothing in ways we would not have predicted and still do not fully understand. Video description. Octopuses share almost no evolutionary history with humans or any other intelligent animal, yet they use tools, recognize faces, demonstrate individual personalities, and solve multi-step problems. This video explores how octopus intelligence evolved completely independently from vertebrate intelligence, what their bizarre decentralized nervous system means for how we think about cognition, why they managed to be so capable despite living only 1 to 2 years with almost no parental care, and how they match colors despite being colorblind. The strange case for intelligence is something that emerges from almost nothing given the right conditions.